Ripple processed $16 trillion in payments last year, but according to Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse, none of those transactions used a digital asset for settlement. At first glance, that sounds shocking. If Ripple has spent years building technology around blockchain and digital assets, why would XRP not be used in those transactions? For many people, this immediately raises an uncomfortable question. If Ripple isn't using XRP today, why would banks ever use it tomorrow? It's a fair question, and it's one that has created a lot of confusion across the XRP community. Some investors hear this and assume it means XRP has failed. Others believe Ripple has abandoned XRP altogether. Then there are those who argue that XRP's big moment is still coming. With so many different opinions circulating online, it becomes difficult to separate facts from assumptions. The reality is far more interesting than either extreme. One of the biggest misconceptions in crypto is believing that a company's success automatically means every piece of its technology is being used at full scale. In the real world, that's rarely how major financial systems evolve. Large institutions don't flip a switch overnight. They test new technologies, manage risk carefully, and expand gradually as confidence grows. To understand why XRP isn't being used everywhere today, we first need to separate two things that are often treated as if they're the same. The first is Ripple, the company that develops payment technology and financial solutions for institutions. The second is XRP, the digital asset that can be used as a bridge for settlement in certain payment flows. Those two are connected, but they are not identical. That's an important distinction because many headlines blur the difference. When people hear that Ripple processed trillions of dollars, they naturally assume every transaction must have been settled. With XRP, when they later discover that wasn't the case, disappointment follows, but the expectation itself may have been based on a misunderstanding. Think of it like building a modern airport. Constructing the airport doesn't mean every airline immediately starts operating there on the first day. The infrastructure may be ready, but airlines still need approvals, routes, scheduling, operational planning, and passenger demand before expanding service. The airport exists first. Widespread usage comes later. Financial infrastructure often develops in a similar way. This is also why legal victories, partnerships, and new announcements don't automatically translate into immediate large-scale adoption. A technology can be technically available while institutions continue evaluating how, where, and when to integrate it into their existing systems. So before assuming that Ripple isn't using XRP means something is wrong, we need to ask a better question. What has to happen before major financial institutions are comfortable using a digital asset in their payment infrastructure? Because once we answer that question, the entire conversation begins to look very different. So if Ripple has the technology, partnerships, and growing institutional interest, what's slowing down the widespread use of XRP? The first answer is surprisingly simple. Legal clarity and operational adoption are not the same thing. Over the past few years, XRP has made significant progress in terms of its legal position in the United States. That helped reduce one of the biggest uncertainties surrounding the asset. But for large financial institutions, a court decision is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Banks don't make billion-dollar decisions based on headlines. They operate under strict compliance departments, risk management teams, regulators, and internal governance processes. Before introducing any new settlement technology, they need confidence that the legal framework is stable, the operational risks are understood, and the regulatory expectations are clear. Think of it this way. Imagine a city builds a brand new bridge. Engineers confirm it's safe, inspections are complete, and it's officially open. Does that mean every trucking company immediately reroutes its entire fleet across that bridge the next morning? Of course not. Transportation companies first conduct their own evaluations. They update routes, train drivers, adjust logistics, and make sure everything fits into their long-term operations. The bridge may be ready, but adoption still happens. Gradually, financial institutions work in much the same way. That's one reason discussions around broader crypto legislation continue to matter. While legal decisions can provide clarity in specific situations, many institutions also look for comprehensive regulatory frameworks before integrating new technologies into their core financial systems. Predictable rules help reduce uncertainty and make long-term planning easier. But regulation isn't the only factor. The second piece of the puzzle is infrastructure. Moving a few $1 million through a payment network is very different from moving billions, or eventually trillions. Large-scale financial systems require deep liquidity, reliable payment corridors, operational resilience, and years of testing before institutions are comfortable relying on them for critical transactions. A useful analogy is building a highway. You don't wait until millions of cars show up before laying the asphalt. The roads, bridges, traffic systems, and safety measures all have to be in place first. Only then can traffic increase safely and efficiently. The same principle applies to financial infrastructure. Before payment volume grows dramatically, the supporting systems have to mature. That includes liquidity, compliance processes, integration with banking systems, and the confidence that everything will continue operating reliably under real-world conditions. This is why we often hear about pilot programs, limited rollouts, and gradual expansion, instead of overnight transformation. Large financial institutions generally prefer to test, measure, improve, and then scale rather than change everything at once. Seen from that perspective, the question changes. Maybe it isn't that XRP isn't ready. Maybe the broader financial ecosystem is still progressing through the careful steps required before digital asset settlement can become part of everyday institutional operations. But there's another development that has created even more confusion within the XRP community. Ripple's launch of its own stablecoin, RLUSD. Some investors immediately worried that RLUSD could replace XRP altogether. That brings us to another question many XRP holders have been asking ever since Ripple introduced its US dollar-backed stablecoin, RLUSD. Some people immediately assumed this meant Ripple was replacing XRP. After all, if Ripple now has its own stablecoin, why would anyone need a bridge asset? The answer is that these two assets are designed for different purposes. A stablecoin is built for price stability. If a financial institution wants to hold a digital dollar without worrying about market volatility, a stablecoin is a practical option. That's exactly why stablecoins have become such an important part of the digital asset ecosystem. XRP, on the other hand, was designed with a different objective in mind. Its potential role is to help move value efficiently between different currencies and financial systems. While stablecoins and bridge assets can sometimes exist within the same ecosystem, they don't necessarily solve the exact same problem. Rather than assuming one replaces the other, many analysts view them as tools that can serve different functions depending on the payment flow and the needs of the institution involved. And that brings us back to the original question: why isn't Ripple using XRP everywhere today? Based on everything we've discussed, the answer is likely much simpler than many headlines suggest. It's not just about technology, it's about regulation, it's about liquidity, it's about infrastructure, and perhaps most importantly, it's about institutional confidence. Large financial institutions don't transform their payment systems overnight. They move carefully, test new technologies, manage risk, and expand gradually. That's how global finance has always worked. So maybe the biggest misconception isn't that XRP isn't being used. Maybe it's expecting global financial infrastructure to change overnight. Ripple appears to be building for the long term, and long-term adoption usually happens step by step, not all at once. So instead of asking why isn't Ripple using XRP yet, perhaps the better question is, what conditions need to exist before institutions choose to use XRP at scale? That question shifts the conversation away from hype and toward understanding how institutional adoption actually works. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Ripple is being too cautious? Or do you believe this gradual approach is exactly how major financial innovation is supposed to happen? Let me know in the comments below if you found this breakdown helpful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more evidence-based XRP analysis. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.